What is up, you savages? This is the Protect Your Neck podcast, and I'm your host, Dan Tom. Analyst is work you could find over at MMAJunkie.com. But on this here program, we break down high-level MMA, and that's what we're going to do here today from top to bottom for UFC on ESPN 22, UFC Vegas 24, UFC Whittaker versus Gastelum. Check the notes and timestamps for when that starts. I will break that down from top to bottom as per usual on these breakdown shows and as per usual on these breakdown shows. Whether you're listening to the audio version on YouTube, give it a subscribe, Daniel Tom MMA, or listening on Apple Podcasts. Appreciate the 5-star ratings and reviews. You can check the show notes there for when the breakdown starts, or go to the very end if you want to listen to less of me, which I don't blame you. And as well as, if you're just in a rush, because, of course, this is going to be an expedited edition. I'm going to try to keep it as short as I can. So I'll recap my picks and plays at the very end. Just warning off the top, I guess. It's sad that I even say warning or apologies in advance. I should not, but I do anyways for those wanting to get mad. Hey, at least know that I understand. But yeah, there's going to be some notes off the top. Again, it's I'm not going to try to play my violin here. But yeah, it's been a crazy week, both medically and doctor-wise stuff. So I've essentially been in just constant pain. And then whenever I turn on my phone to try to go do work or make sure to see what fights are canceled, my replies have been a mess because, as your boy tends to do, is one of the only people in this space, sadly, fighter, fan, media alike, and shouts to those who do, which I will try to shout here. Of course, your boy is one of the only people that tries to remind people that Asian people are human beings too, with the old Stap Asian hate. And I know people are like, "Oh Jesus, here we go, we're getting political." And even though I don't like to do this, folks. I didn't even want to do the podcast. I didn't even want to do this podcast the last couple of weeks. It's just been. It's been really getting me down. And people are like, "Oh, you're soft and hurt. What does that have to do with MMA?" Well, now we have a fighter injecting it into MMA. Injecting politics, injecting Asian hate. Kind of proving my point, and yet people still, up in the replies, the racism denial that is very prevalent in the MMA space. And I'm not saying, racism needs to take over your life or look at it that way. I mean, shoot, man, I'm still thriving. My family's still thriving, and even though that could be taken as some kind of bootstrap story, as they often are or interpreted or can be, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to let you know that I don't let it, or I try to let it, ruin my days or nights. But to be honest, yeah, it's been a bit tough. Now, according to the internet, that makes me soft. For speaking out about human lives or humans being unfairly targeted for how they look, which is essentially what, detaching the politics, since y'all love to detach politics, but oddly are really quiet when Rose goes better dead than red. Yeah, let's detach politics for a second, even, just to prove my point and to not ruffle the feathers. And again, you guys listening to this are like, I don't know why I'm preaching to the choir, because you guys are some of the most kind people, and I think I've already vetted that through just doing a couple episodes. I mean, you just have to speak once about it. As you can see, you will get fucking flooded in this community. But even though I've over-delivered from week-to-week shows, even though I've avoided the McGregor and Jake Paul news for years now, and all these things, there's a secret why I don't talk about these common current events that get over-talked about on every other podcast. I actually do one of the podcasts that, aside from my weird sense of humor, I stick to sports more than most. So that ratio still holds strong. However, it doesn't matter. Ratios, as you can see, people still going to think the way they think. And that's fine. I'm not trying to make anybody think any way, much less about politics. You guys know that's not my deal. I only speak out when people are unfairly targeted. And I brought the same energy. And in fact, I did even more when BLM was going around. And for the people thinking I'm soft for just speaking out with fact-based things, citing fact-based issues. If that's upsetting people to make me soft, then I guess I'm soft. But then I don't know what that means when I actually, when I was, and maybe I have shed tears for this. I don't know. Maybe I'm just so fucking worn down from the MMA space. But yeah, I remember shedding tears watching George Floyd get murdered. That make me fucking soft too. It made me soft for getting upset seeing people joke about that guy's murder fucking a year later. after we were reminded that racism is alive and well, and people still denying that shit, it hurts. And even though, I've said this before, the stereotype MMA space and just reply guy TMs that whether it's regarding women, issues regarding women or race, which is relevant to the Rose and Weili thing. And I'm sorry, I'm speaking because not enough people do, or they're speaking about it very wrongly. And and again, after being accused of being a fucking communist now, apparently, I got to at least defend myself here a bit, folks. So I'm sorry, bear with me. You guys are awesome. And rounding out to that point, and to the point made previously that it's usually, ironically enough, white dudes that are, questioning racism in my replies, as the joke is when it comes to issues of race or women's issues. Those guys seem to be the arbiter. But to show that I'm not, again, I really want to work towards solidarity here, not just as a word, but actually. And just to show that I'm not, getting, although I'm addressing these things, I don't mean all white people are bad, or all black people are bad, or all this are bad, or whatever, because that's obviously stupid and wrong. But, like, you want to know some of the most compassionate people that have been in my DMs as far as listeners to the shows, friends of the space, and whatnot. A lot of all white guys, pretty much, from American, Canadian, Jewish, not Jewish. So I don't want anybody to feel alienated listening to this show. Majority of my friends are white. I am half, or not half, but a good chunk, almost half of an amalgamation of Caucasians, Nordic, Irish, Italian. In no way am I trying to alienate anybody, man. In fact, to my sample size, white guys, as we like to attack and have been the target, have been some of the most compassionate to me personally. So do not misconstrue this. Because, what even hurt most was, like, there was a dude who was like, and you never know, because there's a couple dudes who are like, I'm half Asian, or I'm half, and you don't know that. And they're citing it, like, meaningfully, and it's like, oh, okay, it's only making you look more dumb, the fact that you can't see these issues then. But there was a dude, there's a black dude, and he had BLM in his profile, and a bunch of pro NBA stuff, and LeBron, and was lecturing me on how anti-Asian racism isn't real. And not just in his profile, you go to his timeline. He even retweeted some of the articles that I retweeted, about another cop murdering a black brother or sister. Of course, it was a brother, a male. I'm sure you guys heard. Anyways, and just that really pissed me off. And so shared something about qualified immunity, as I actually wrote an article about that. People accusing me, aren't you in a position? It's like, dude, I can barely even get my articles read on Junkie if you look at the numbers, because y'all are just too busy clicking on Twitter beefs and Jake Paul stuff. Like, it's so hard to even get actual analysis for Stick to Sports Crowd, by the way. Like, much less my stupid voice here, which I probably shouldn't even be preaching on my podcast and further weeding out my listeners. But I have put my money where my mouth is, more than most, which is ironic considering the space is a martial arts space. Martial arts, whatever happened to that fallacy of self-defense and stopping bullying and respect to Asian culture that was integrated if you would do martial arts in the 90s. And don't get me wrong, that could be taken the wrong way too. There could be that whole master and abuse of dogma and, that whole weird woo-woo sense. And Asians are just as guilty as anyone else when it comes to that, okay? But talking about the actual culture, the genuine culture and respect that did come from martial arts. And it's almost like, man, maybe the people that were, upset with Bruce Lee for bringing it to the States had a point. Because now, after MMA took off, it's just like, there's no mentions of, and I'm guilty of it too. Of all the martial arts I follow, one and Asian fighters seem to be the less. So, folks, like, this shit runs so deep that I'm guilty of it too. And now it's just like we're non-existent. We're just as invisible as we were when I grew up in the world. As history has kind of written us to be. And that's why it really hurts to see, like, all these people all of a sudden selectively woke about China now going, don't you know that when it's not even about that, it's about judging a face for how they look, for one. That's what the Rose and Weili thing is about, folks. That's the problem. Anti-Asian hate is real. There's facts, there's statistics, there's video evidence, there's anecdotal, there's all of the above. Check, check, check. They even had measurements of how every time, Trump said it, things went up. And again, fucking, it's not a left or right thing, man. Believe me, as I've said before, and as is being proven now, both sides are fucking evil, man, and we're seeing that. So I could care less about that shit. It's not about politics for me, folks. I'm not defending communism in my post, nor did I, which is the crazy thing. But everybody turns it into that because they just can't see racism, much less racism, especially toward an Asian face, which was why I brought up the person, the black guy with the BLM lecturing me about how anti-Asian racism isn't real and how China is bad, yet he has MBA shit all in his profile. And if you guys thought I got sidetracked, and which another thing that made me a lot less fans and followers by talking bad about, oh my God, talked bad about Shaq or Shaq and Chuck on their long-standing thing on TNT and being racist toward Asians. It's like, that's a product of that dude. That dude grew up with the same shit that I grew up with. Except he didn't have a problem with it because his idols were saying it and made it okay. Now this person is an adult. And for all the people that are like anti-China legitly or whatever, like, you all know how problematic the business and stuff and that those dealings that kind of started going public for, what was it, 2019 or whatever, I forget, when it really was catching people's eyes in the mainstream media. I'm like, this guy's lecturing me about China. And most of these people have never been there. Where were you guys when I was in college in the early 2000s and they were handing out flyers when they discovered that the Chinese government was still experimenting on their people, that they were finding people mutated with missing organs? Mass grave sites that rivaled the ones that the Japanese did in World War II, which, by the way, the numbers don't officially, and I'm not trying to split hairs because they're both awful, the numbers don't officially outweigh what the Germans did to the Jews. But what China was doing to Japan in that time and testing their nuclear weapons, stringing pregnant women up to poles for their bayonet practices, taking them on the marches that would make what America did them into the Native Americans put to shame. That's just not in the fucking history books. Here in America, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about their genocide. Like, so if you want to talk about the Chinese government, A, focus on the Chinese government, B, know your shit, and C, most importantly of all, if, according to your logic and these historical facts that y'all love, that they're so bad, why aren't we sympathizing with the Chinese people for just years of persecution, man? Because just like the Russians, who Rose should have an issue with, because it was the USSR regime that created the offenses to her Lithuanian family members that she's citing. The Russians, too, in World War II had camps for their own people. I mean, yes, I'm not defending these governments by any means. But why can't we have sympathy for the people? Which is why I always have so much sympathy, and it's not a surprise that from my mother to now me, I was just talking about this, like most of our friends in mainland America, we've gravitated toward Italians and mainly Jewish people. And it's because from family style, how they eat, how they take care of their family, the stereotypes of managing money even are actually very synonymous with both Chinese and Jewish people. So we even share the, I don't want to say negative stereotype, but yes, it's used toward us as a negative stereotype. That's why I'm hesitant to use the word Jew, because that you can't. You're trying to Jew me down, and I apologize if that triggered anybody. But for what it's worth, growing up in Hawaii, Chinese were looked at similar ways. And in fact, you would say, "Oh, you trying to Chang him? Oh, Chang him? Oh, this guy's fucking Chang. He's tight like a Chang." So there's a lot of understanding that us Chinese have for Jewish people. Not the least of which, I think, the unspoken theme being, persecution throughout human history. Documented human history, no matter the politics, no matter the places, no matter the time in history. Jewish people and Chinese people have been disproportionately pretty, so it really hurts to see people just not treat someone like Weili as a person. And it shows, from the Asian submissiveness and, to foreigners, or how it gets turned into the model minority myth once you become an Asian American. How it supports these things, Rose saying she has no freedom of what she can say, which was the tired conspiracy conjecture I was referring to. And it's just ironic because they shared the same manager, a Chinese manager, a first-generation Chinese manager. His dad was straight from China, a lot of Chinese roots. And I don't know the family history, because I believe it's from Hong Kong, Brian Bellator, is a gentleman, nothing but a true pro. I have nothing bad to say about him, and I just hope he gets in Rose's ear as an Asian man, a manager, a smart man. And I don't know his history or his stance. Maybe he doesn't like communism too or whatever. That's totally cool. But apparently he doesn't like it not enough to work with Weili and make money off her, right? Which is the ironic part, you know? We from martial arts to managers to fighters themselves, like Rose Namajunas, who, Weili, when asked about Rose, not only did she say that nice thing, that visual clip that's going around, what stands out to me about the visual clip is how she says she likes Rose because she does things like Chinese Wing Chun. She's looking for things to relate. And Rose, who started off with karate, Japanese to, still embracing Chinese arts like Wing Chun, as well as embracing black culture with the word thug in her name, despite, constantly saying in interviews on the way up how she was, kind of the white victimhood. I was the only white person, and all these other flags that we kind of should have seen. I'm not Mr. Appropriation guy, but that's the word. Whether you like the word, whether it triggers you, the fact is, by definition, cultural appropriation. Case and example exists because of shit like this. You can take the martial art and love it. You can use it to make money and help you personally with your mental health, and then make money off of that and do all these things. But you can't acknowledge a Chinese person for a Chinese person. Instead, we acknowledge a Chinese person as some government that wasn't even responsible for what they did to your people. And what's missing, and I've shared this in the replies of my tweet, is that the part of history that she seems hung up on and that she's factually wrong about hanging on Weili, if we want to dive back into the political now, was that the Lithuanians were the better dead. I forget, it's Bertrand. Shout out, by the way, to a more educated person that can speak on this stuff than me, because I too, folks, have to still further educate myself. I'm not beyond it. At stuff from Sam Yang, I believe it was someone Bertrand, who is the better dead from red quote, or better red than dead quote, which bums me out. Even my, all the outlets using that, and it's catchy, and now people are saying it because people parrot things like, yeah, baby, when Austin Powers come out, and they're treating the same thing with something that spreads hatred, and people are like, there's no racism there. She used the word better dead than red what Weili is. I don't know how serious I take her saying she hopes she can become friends, or whatever she phrased it at the end of the interview, which the only reason she said that, it doesn't matter if she even used the right words, because at that point the damage was done, but the only reason she said that is because the interview injected that. So people citing that need to keep aware of that. But what she leaves out when she doubles down on these statements, when she's had time to think about these statements, she doubles down to Ariel Helwani, a Jew, is that the part of history that she's hung up on, the better dead than red guy, they ended up choosing the Nazis over the communists. And, choosing lesser of two evils is something you can't choose if you're people going to defend that, right? Well, how? It's not their fault. It was the country they're in. Stop, hold that thought, and turn it around back to the relevant fucking thing we're talking about. If that's true, then why the fuck are you questioning? Why the fuck are we blaming Weili? But okay, let's just go for a second. They chose the Nazis, and not only did they choose the Nazis for people that are quick to defend here, but as a result, 90%, what was it, over 200,000? I don't know what it was. 90% of Lithuanian Jews were murdered because of that. So, yeah, Rose, let's focus on that part of history. And let's double down on it to a Jew. And I don't know if Ariel was aware of that. And it's, I don't know if it's an access media thing of why, certain media people are really scarce to say things. And I'm friends with these people. And even with Ariel's one of the few media people. And I respect it, because say what you will, he's got a big platform. We need people like Ariel speaking up, people with big platforms. He is one of the few, few as in I can count on one fucking hand, and I've been paying attention, who has said anything, acknowledging things to stop Asian hate, much less saying it on their timeline. So I'm not coming at these people. I just wish people were more educated as far as how this shit goes, and why Rose is wrong on even on a non-political level, on a human being level, on a factual level, on a historical level, and yes, on a political level. She contradicts herself every step of the way. She has a right to feel how she wants to feel. I'm not challenging that. I'm not defending communism. I'm not telling her she can't motivate herself in any way that she chooses. But when you do have a platform, first of all, whether you have a platform or not, you should, maybe not say racist stuff or stuff that spreads and fuels racism when it's at an all-time high. Anti-Asian sentiment, anti-Asian statements, when they're at an all-time high, first of all, much less when you have a platform, much less when you're given a chance to correct yourself and, sharpen your message, save your fan base. Because we're all here to make money off martial arts, right? I know not all martial arts are Asian, but a majority of them are, and there's a big, colonial, for lack of better words, efforts that, it was brought over in and appropriated. And look at the fucking yoga scene, Jesus. But, it just sucks, man. We're all here to make money and enjoy martial arts, but yet, I'm not telling you to go fucking stop Asian hate in your bio. I'm not asking you guys to do that. I'm not asking you again to go fucking empty your bankroll at your local sushi shop and suck off the chef when you're done. I'm not asking for any of that, but I'm just asking, can we recognize Asians no matter what country they're from as human beings first? And before we feel tweeting out that there's no racism and all these things, maybe let's just stop, listen to what people have to say. God forbid, look in the mirror a little, as I need to do those things too, and I'm not beyond those. And maybe things can start to get a little better, because there's a lot more anti-imperialist and history with American stuff that we could be judged for, and I'm glad we're not. And if you're Mr. Pro-American and military, well, I come from a military family. And despite what happened to Hawaii and how Asians were treated and written out of the history books, it didn't stop my grandfather, who I'm going to go bury in Hawaii this summer, from, as a teenager, running to Hickam Air Force Base, dropping all the supplies from the market for their family, him and his friends, to go help from the Japanese Zeros attacking, and having his friend gunned down in front of him. And he would later join the military and take part of helping rebuild Japan after what we did to it. And my other grandpa was a bit older and architecturally savvy as an engineer, and could help with some stuff as far as repairing boats for Pearl Harbor, and later went on to serve this country. Both Chinese men, and he helped America beat the Russians because he was an engineer on our first nuclear submarine, the Nautilus. But another thing how this ties into MMA, tell me this, familiar folks, America wanted to be first, because being first, no matter what the health consequences of human beings are, is more important. And because we wanted to be first, we built our submarine without a cap on it for the nuclear reactor, causing a 60% upward spike of radiation exposure to the American crew compared to the Soviet crew. And which is where my grandfather got a weird form of Parkinson's, where he just really died a slow death. And we were happy that he died by the time, because it was just fucking miserable. Go look that up. But hey, we were first. So there's a lot to take in with this event that's going to happen next week, of being the first crowd with crowds back in Florida, which a lot of the people butthurt is because I was talking about. I'm like, y'all know Florida's been at the butt of so many jokes, but the fact that I bring y'all up, and you guys don't have the greatest record there, but the fact that I bring y'all up, there's a lot of people getting butthurt, and I know a lot of good dudes in Florida, by the way. So it's not a blanket statement. I just was more referencing to my fear for safety. For any Asians in the crowd, not even just Weili and her team, because if you think people can tell the difference, no, they can't. They can't tell the difference from Asians. They can't even tell from Latinos and Asians. You know how many times I've been coming up on it when I work construction on a job site? Especially because I'm brown, people go, "Excuse me, senor," which is why I'm sympathetic to my brown brothers and sisters, my Latin brothers and sisters, because just for being brown, I've had to get tastes of what they have to feel every day, and that bullshit. So yeah, I probably should have a lot less empathy and more compassion, as my man Sam says, because it can lead you down a path. However, I still stand by that this world could use a little more empathy. And what we should be working toward is solidarity, working together. No matter if you're black, white, Asian, we should all be working toward the same thing, man. And not letting the bullshit distract us. So, thank you for those of you who are still fucking listening, who haven't unsubscribed. I can only imagine my listenership's taking a drop. Thank you for those of you who already were treating Asians like human beings and this wasn't an issue. But we all could do better, including myself. You know, I'm not beyond bullshit either, folks. You know, and I need to educate myself better too. So I'm just pointing out the complete hypocrisy of the stick to sports, the political injection, and Asian hate, because this whole thing with Rose and Weili and the reaction from it, you could say what you will about my last episodes previous, but they kind of proved it right. You don't have to like me or what I'm saying, but I'm saying it for a reason, clearly. It is tied into what we do. So yeah, while I'm still doing this job, let's do the job. 27 minutes, Jesus Christ. Alright. Should edit this into 2 episodes, but I'm not. I'm just going to push through and make y'all fucking hate me for doing that. Bellator 256 recap. Pretty much Cody Law, Dalton Hosta made me look good on my Dark Horses Bellator article. Shout out to Spencer Kite, by the way, because a lot of our fighters have been fighting and looking good. So that episode we did as age well. And then Bader won by decision, which I predicted. Bellator 257 happens tonight, as I'm recording this day of. I surprised myself. I hate picking Bellator. And you always pick the favorites to be safe, but I ended up on the dogs for the Grand Prix picks. Yagji Mordov. Basically, just by first round knockout or bust, it is for him, and I picked that to happen because I just can't trust Corey, who will put himself in harm's way. I ended up taking Davis, despite, being one of the early people on Nemkov and picking Nemkov the first time they fought, just because I still haven't seen Nemkov have to meaningfully show multiple layers defensively or offensively of grappling, much less over the course of 3 rounds, and we still haven't had to see him go 3 rounds since he faded against Davis and ended up in mount position. So till I see it, I can't pick it. So I'm going to go tortoise in the hare and pick the tortoise. The hare will be faster, but I can't trust him to not fuck up the race. So there's that. UFC on ABC2 recap. 7-6 overall in picks, 1-2 in straight plays, 1-0 in parlay pieces, and then I ended up doing 2-2 in straight plays because I jumped on certain things that I told you I would. If the price got low enough, like it did for Daniel Rodriguez and Mike Perry, which we'll get to in a second. But the card is headlined by Marvin Vettori and Kevin Holland, another impromptu middleweight matchup. Vettori beats Holland by decision. That's what I called for. Not surprised there. Arnold Allen defeated Sadiq Youssef by decision. I should have picked Allen. I always like the southpaws, and I did cite that the southpaws could be a problem. I think that suspicion has been confirmed. Congrats to Arnold Allen. And again, I didn't play Youssef. It wasn't a confident pick. As, like I also said with the podcast with Spencer Kite, we said Arnold Allen is still no joke, even though we were building up Mads Burnell, who also fights tonight over at Bellator. So we'll see how that goes. Julian Marquez defeated Sam Alvey, RNC. I wasn't on the submission prop this time, but grats if you were. I did end up taking Marquez on something that made me some cash on the side because his line only got lower. Mackenzie Dern defeated Nina Nunes by submission. I was wrong with that one. But, I mean, it's just one of those where it was... You're not surprised that Dern submitted Nunes. I don't think anybody is, regardless how you picked it. It was just the fact that Dern didn't have a meaningful wrestling game, and the stats didn't really support that. So, one of those things, you can't pick it until you see it, but she shows it. She needed to show it. So, deservedly excited for Dern. Daniel Rodriguez, D-Rod, which I'm pretty sure is a name about his dick, defeated Mike Perry via decision. I get why people would take the plus money stab on Perry. He was training at Masters, actually came in looking in shape. But Again, like I said, southpaws who can counter can be problematic. Thanks for the shout, Amber Dixon, who listens to this show. Give her a follow, by the way. She's awesome. And give me a shout on there for that one. Joe Selecki defeated Jim Miller. Minasan by decision. I should have played the decision prop. I just have a problem playing against Miller because I always sprinkle on him, even though I pick against him as an analyst. So hopefully you didn't go off the cliff and you listen to the analysis there, not my heart. Gamrot defeated Scott Holtzman's second round KO. That was really nice. Hope Scotty's okay. John McDessie defeated Ignacio Bahamundes. He keeps hanging around. There's McDessie. Charges Danho. Makes us all look like idiots for writing him off. Defeating Yagan de Castro. Chuck guy had a double burger. Jack Shore defeated Hunter Azur via split decision. Closer than I expected, but also expected to be a decision. Another prospect of mine against, or Spencer's, I should say, I was on his list. Give Spencer the credit there, although I supremely back Spencer's take there, as I did at the betting window. Jack Shore comes through. Luis Saldana defeated Jordan Griffin. Unanimous decision. I had it for Griffin. I don't think it was an all-out robbery. But the problem is, whether you're saying robbery or you're overcorrecting the steering wheel the other way, is there's the key word there. That's a perfect example of overcorrecting the steering wheel, not giving you anything, despite even Griffin going after it at the end with a late takedown, back take, and sub attempt to kind of just dress it up for the judges. But even when you draw it up in crayon, unless you make them submit, you get, or severely bloody them, you get no credit for any grappling or striking you do. So again, I'm glad we're moving toward damage, but I wish people would acknowledge that there's a bit overcorrecting the steering wheel. Really devaluing grappling going on, which bums me out. Da Un Jung, though, didn't stop him from taking it to Thick Willie Knight. Hey, man, Asians needed a win, so even though I was on the wrong side of that one, happy to see Asian doing well, putting a win streak. Hopefully he gets some shine and a step up, and Thick Willie does not need to step up. That dude needs some time to step up his game. And I say that with love. I still love Thick Willie, by the way. I'm not all butthurt about him losing or anything like that, or a fickle fan. I'm still a fan of Thick Willie, baby. You know that. You know this. But yeah, I wouldn't want him taking too big of a step up there. Impa Kasanganai defeated Sasha Platnikov. Shout out to my man Chris there. One of the listeners and supporters of this show. Even though it just hurt my heart to just kind of just see people tell there's no racism and then having racism to all this shit stuff thrown at me. There were highlights on Twitter and I retweeted one of them, and I'm glad Impa did as well, man. Staying connected with the fans. I mean, if you don't think Impa's a good dude, you can just go straight to Satan's land, because man, Impa is just salt of the earth, and we need more fighters like this guy. And so it's just extra cool to see, speaking of salt of the earth, not just a fan or supporter of the show, guy I've actually met, Chris, to leave it at that. But he's got a beautiful, healthy, cute, it's all hell baby boy, which is great to see. The finer things in life you got to appreciate, folks. But he sent me this video, and you guys will see at Dentom MMA. They retweeted it, and it's his son doing punches and kicks to the TV and getting all stoked for Impa, and apparently the kid will now start throwing punches and kicks, and that's his way of telling his dad that he wants to watch UFC. So I love shit like that, man. I love it. That's all Dan Tom wants. He just wants some feel good stuff, We can laugh, we can have a good time, but just appreciate the humanity in life. That's all I'm saying. I don't give a shit about politics or colors of your skin. Just, hey man, fucking appreciate the good shit. And that was such good. Shout out to Chris for sharing that, man. That was a much needed positive input. Okay, so now we're gonna jump over to UFC on ESPN 22, 34 minutes. This will be quick. Yeah. Alright, this card's headline. Check out my main event breakdown that just dropped. The White Robert Whittaker minus 250. Comeback on Kelvin Gastelum plus 210. Took Whittaker by decision the first time around. Took him by this time around too. Not just because of the adjustments, and even the on-the-fly adjustments. I shared that clip of, him spotting Darren Till's tie shorts tell, where he tugs up his shorts and he just launches a 1-2 and drops him in the second round of their fight. But more so is that he seems to like open stance matchups, Whittaker. When he has them, he is 4-0 against UFC level lefties. But more specifically, not just overall striking flow, but since Yoel Romero hurt his knee that first time, so the second Yoel Romero fight till that recent Till fight, Southpaws, right? He has now made that like an objective number one to really hurt his opponent's legs. And he does that much better and defends much better, as we saw in the Jared Cannonier, who was attacking a lot from unorthodox crime, right? But he does a lot better both at defending and, ironically enough, it's usually the opposite fighters, but he does better at attacking the leg despite the open stance styling. And not that MMA math is something you should bank on, but when Kelvin Gastelum fought Darren Till, aside from the ineffective clinch stuff, which I believe Gastelum's worked on, it looks like he's kind of trended back toward wrestling. Aside from that, the reason why Darren Till really won is he was lightening up Gastelum's leg anytime they were at range. So I suspect that that's going to be the case here. Whittaker's going to light up Gastelum's leg. He will be the faster of the two. He will be the better adjuster of the two. And even though I like to see Gastelum trending toward his wrestling, and that level-changing threat, if he applies it, should, in theory, help his striking. As we've seen, Whittaker's wrestling defense is super strong. He's been using his wrestling offense more, but it's hard to say because, you could criticize that he's not been super dominant or clean with his takedowns, or when he does, he hasn't been clean with his control time because he's usually looking to inflict damage. But it's another reason is like a lot of times he is just looking to inflict damage, especially when he uses those transitionary single legs to spin, get center cage position, and strike off the break. Really cool move he does. Either way, I don't think that Gastelum, despite actually coming from an American wrestling base, will get the better of Robert Whittaker, who has developed quietly into a very good wrestler. So I'm going to go with Whittaker by decision. However, the southpaw killer is the left hook. You can only bank on a good chin for so long. Kelvin Gastelum's been through a lot of wars. Let's just say that, especially because he's taking it on short notice, if Whittaker's really feeling himself, he could become the first person to stop Gastelum with a left hook in rounds 4 or 5. I'll leave it at that. But the official pick is by decision. I haven't played him. I haven't played much. I've been kind of... Next fight, Andrei Arlovski minus 120, Chase Sherman plus 100. Did not do any tape study for this one. I apologize, folks. I probably shot my listenership in the foot. Believe me, my goal is to just get back to studying tape and just doing this show like I normally do, how I built my name. But again, like I explained off the top of this show, that can't open my timeline without racist bullshit. Anyways, I'm not trying to blame it. It's my fault for coming short ultimately. So sorry, but I'm taking Arlovski there. I think he's gonna. I think he's gonna take him to school, despite his age. Better cardio, better lasting ability, and the power is there's not much of a power differential. Austin Hubbard minus 185, Dakota Bush plus 160. I actually selected Bush. This is one of the few fights I actually watched some fights on. I watched some of Dakota Bush's stuff. And it's hard because you're like, oh, Hubbard survived this guy. How's he going to get choked out by Selecki? Then he gets choked out by Selecki in the first round. But then as we saw, as crafty as Selecki is, he doesn't have the most complete game either, right? And he's a specialist. And unless you're also a specialist like a Jim Miller, who can hold the proverbial door, if you will, at least enough not to get finished, and maybe not enough to win, then, Selecki, can be put in a boring fight. Whereas Dakota Bush is definitely a specialist. He actually wrestled. I forget what his credentials were. But from early on, looks like a guy just really took to taking the back. That's his specialty. Really good rear naked choke. And that's what you got to do against Hubbard, because Hubbard, it's weird because you're like, oh, he survived against Davi Ramos. If you look at it, Davi Ramos was like working on his striking that fight. I don't think he even took Hubbard down to like the end of the round, or end of the third round, even at that, right? Like, he struck with him pretty much the whole fight. And when Hubbard does get up from getting takedowns, it's his get-up ability more than his counter wrestling. And he does the kind of the version of how John Crouch instills in his fighters, the cage get-up, tripoding against the cage with a wrist control. except he does it in a more of an inviting way to the back, which is not good against a back take specialist. So I'm actually going to take Dakota Bush. Looks like he's in shape despite taking this fight on a bit short notice. Looks like he's been training and staying ready, if you will. Deceptively, more experienced than maybe you would off first glance. So yeah, I'll probably sprinkle a little bit, just put my money where my mouth is. It's one of the few fights I actually watched some tape on. But I'll take him for a fast start in the small cage on Hubbard. Next fight, Bartosz Fidinski minus 120, GM3, Gerald Meerschaert plus 100. Not too super confident in it. There's probably some bias for sure playing into it, as I am one of the few people who admit my biases, as I do for GM3, Koopa Troopa himself. But I'm going to take GM3 over the spoiler Fabinski. Although Fabinski is going to try and may succeed in controlling him for a large part of this fight. I think GM3 could pull out a submission or hurt him on the feet and make some things happen. And well, let's just hope that the judges are staying consistent with not rewarding wrestling where there's no advancements or damage, because that's like Fabinski's game. So if they're overcorrecting the steering wheel, a guy like Fabinski should have a very uphill battle no matter what the fight is, even if there's stylistic pathways, which there are. But again, I'm going to go with a more damaging and dangerous fighter, both on the feet and on the floor. And if you hope that he doesn't get the finish, that the judges stay consistent with that energy and reward him for that. Next fight, Jakar Close, plus 100. Jeremy Little Heathen Stevens, minus 120. Agree here, hoping the line flips, so you get Jeremy Stevens at some plus money. I'll take Stevens here. Jakar Close is actually going to have to fight against type to win this one. He's a clinch and make it ugly guy, and Stevens deceptively strong in the clinch with counter wrestling, especially from the clinch. You got to do well-timed shots to take down Stevens. Even if you're a bigger guy like Close, which I don't think is going to be much of a size difference. Stevens was stripping his body down unneededly to 145 for years now. I'm surprised he didn't make this jump back up sooner, to be honest. I'm happy to see it. I'll take Stevens here. We'll probably sprinkle on him if this line gets any tighter, although 120 is already justifiable play of a number as is. Justine Quiche plus 240, Tracy Cortez minus 280. Pretty steep, but stylistically, this is going to be a hard one for Quiche to upset. I think Cortez should be able to hold more dominant positions, despite Quiche being more of a scrambler. And Cortez to get off more of the meaningful offense against Quiche, who doesn't wear offense, much less produce offense as well on the floor, but doesn't wear offense as well. Merrick, he'll throw off to older jokes. She can kind of look like there's like a picture of her. She looks like Reagan from The Exorcist. I love Justin Quiche, by the way. But taking Tracy Cortez here. Next fight, Luis Pena minus 150, Alex Munoz plus 130. Took Munoz and staff picks. I'm going to stick to it. I'm kind of glad that he hasn't had a fight in a while, but the fact that he survived Nasparas, a southpaw, I think he could survive a less potent, a less powerful, a less process-driven, less options of a fighter in Luis Pena. Even if Luis Pena does bring his A game, I still feel like his A game needs to be on wrestling security, or at least the ability to scramble, as Luis Pena seems to be one of those funk guys who is okay with giving the takedown and kind of working from there. Against a guy like Munoz, who I don't have his wrestling credentials offhand, but if he is the wrestling coach at Team Alpha Male, just like similar to Fiziev, you gotta suspect they're pretty decent in that area. And he will dictate. And even though there's a lot to be desired from the striking, he is older, but still young enough in his career where there can be improvement. Hence why I liking the time off for Munoz to potentially show those improvements. Think he's got the intangible factor on his side as well. I will go with him as an underdog. Still not sold on Violent Bob Ross. I'll probably be sprinkling on him. Next fight, Alexander Romanov, minus 140, plus 120, Juan Espino. Not sure why this line is this low. It was even lower. It was opened up to even. You guys know I've been big on Romanov. Didn't watch Tough, and Espino barely fights, and he's old, and apparently he's a grappling specialist, but I think Romanov's still going to roll here, so I may just lay the chalk on Romanov. But warning, I did not research Juan Espino. But there's also a reason between him not fighting and the level that he fights at, so... maybe it's a blind spot at heavyweight, where there's so much technical gold untapped. But anyways, T-stand, stop shitting on heavyweights. Tony Gravely, minus 325. Anthony Birchak, plus 265. I like Anthony Birchak, man. Soft spot for him. Shout out to the Verbal Tapcast, one of my favorite podcasts. Also, shout out to the Verbal Tap podcast. They're one of the few podcasts in the space that will actually talk about issues like that I talked about off the top. and make me feel less bad when like those issues, especially knowing the politics of most grapplers and knowing those guys are waiting in. I can only imagine the backlash they get. So thank you guys for doing that. They've had Anthony Burchak on multiple times, who's a great co-host. Saul's got a soft spot for that guy, but I'm going to take Gravely here, although the chalk it's dog or pass at this point due to the numbers. I get it, picking Gravely, but I ain't touching that chalk. Next fight, Lupita Godinez, minus 275. Jessica Penne, plus 235. Pretty sure this inflated from opener and maybe even open / inflated from the original booking, which I get. This is a classic, fade the layoff, fade the older fighter in that case. I get it. MMA gamblers, dicks get hard when it comes to fading older fighters. And I like Jessica Penne. Got a soft spot for her, but pick is Godinez. Abdul Razak Al Hassan, minus 290. Jacob Malkoun, plus 245. Malkoun, brown belt, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, trains with Robert Whittaker. But as we see, this is kind of a spot where Razak Al Hassan can come out in his vintage form, and we will learn nothing about him. And hell no, am I paying chalk for Razak Al Hassan, even in this spot. But he is the pick. Next fight, Josiane Nunes, minus 115. Farazarian plus. I think this fight's off, actually, because Farazarian missed weight. So, nothing there. Apologies, folks. Not a lot. Spent more time talking about current events and stuff, but considering I never talk about those things and there's actual meaning and disproportionate amount of lack of talk, I feel like I had to. Hey, I probably cost myself some listeners, but I guess I didn't need those anyway. So if you're still listening, congratulations. You passed the compassion, empathy, caring for your human being test. So congratulations. Again, I apologize, folks, even though I shouldn't. I really want to just get back to normal. I just want to break down fights. But if people in this space are going to keep promoting, injecting, hate, politics, racism where it doesn't belong, as racism and hate don't belong anywhere, obviously, then your boy here is going to have a problem with that. It has nothing to do with politics. I don't care about politics, I should say. Strike that. It's never been. That's one thing that's been consistent. My issues have only been when people of color or women are unfairly targeted. I'm sorry if you have such a problem with that. If you don't, you're probably still listening, so thank you guys. You guys are the gold human beings. Those of you who listen, communicate with me on the YouTube channel in the comments. Thank you. In my DMs, I appreciate you. I try to get back as fast as I can. I don't care what side of the spectrum, what color you are. I love you guys. I really do. It's not fake bullshit. It's genuine solidarity I want here. And I will try to move more toward compassion, although I express a little more empathy. Either way, good luck with your picks and plays. # stop Asian hate. And always protect your neck.